Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Today I'm speaking with Michael Weaver. He's the Director of Operations at ProPricer. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, you're welcome. It's good to be here.
So, we're talking a lot about innovation within DoD. I think back to Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is when DoD really started making this push toward near-peer competition, rethinking how they're doing acquisition in the sense of what they're buying. What's the Defense Department looking for these days in 2021, and what are they going to be looking for in their future strategies?
Well, that's a pretty broad topic. The simple answer for me when it comes to innovation is really it's about updating all of the entire process. So whether that's technology that's used, the technology that's created, what processes are involved in purchasing of those goods and services, everything's geared towards making the warfighter more effective. For me, I'm going to start by tackling just kind of a small chunk of what the DoD could or should be looking for. I work at a veteran-owned small business, and our focus there is the proposal pricing process. So we work with contractors to aggregate their estimates and price them up. We slice and dice that data to determine where they can make changes and allow them to perform some sort of analysis to help them become a little bit more competitive. And then getting that proposal submitted to an agency for review, then negotiation and award, and all of the things that go into the government side of it, from creating the IGCE and working with contractors, to determine what those pricing and rates should be. There's so many steps before and after that process that are definitely outside my area of expertise. So I don't know if we really need to go into all of that. I'm going to try to speak basically on what it comes to, or what I feel about the proposal process. And where I kind of get that background from is that I have the opportunity to work with government agencies and their contractors as an outside observer. So as a software vendor, we get to come in and sort of listen to the pain points that they have and really focus on empathizing with the end user. We've been doing that with the contracting side of the house for over 30 years, and from the government side for 10 or 12 years at least, where we get to go through and sit with program offices and listen to how they do their evaluations, their cost analysis, the technical evaluations, how they're pricing up the IGCE, and how they get the data flow moving back and forth from contractor to government. And just trying to streamline that process is going to require new technological methods. It's going to require shortening the proposal cycle by creating a way to streamline the input and submission of those proposal processes, and making it easy for that data send to go back and forth for the negotiations process.
So one of the things the Defense Department is trying to do to bring in that innovation that you were talking about is talking more to small businesses and lowering the barrier of entry for those small businesses. How can changing the way that proposals are brought in, how the Defense Department can reach out to them by revamping, as you were saying, this sort of acquisition process, and bring these small businesses in to provide some of that innovation and new ideas that they might not get from Lockheed Martin or Raytheon?
Well, I think about sort of the cycles that technology has gone through and how this really helps the small business now. When you think back to the mainframe in its heydays, the type of companies that could purchase or afford that type of equipment were going to be large contractors or large companies that had a lot of capital to spend. And they would go in and purchase all of that equipment. They would fill up their staff, and they would put it on their profit and loss statement as a capital expense, tracking depreciation, all of that stuff. And it was really cost prohibitive for somebody like a small business to be able to go in and afford that and to be able to compete for even some of the larger contracts. As that technology has sort of shifted, we saw personal computing come in and sort of level the playing field for everybody to have access to the same type of hardware, whether that was, to the same scale as a large company, probably not, but everybody had a personal computer and was able to do the same type of work. And then we moved into virtualization. So moving from terminal server and RDP over to Citrix, where we're kind of looking at a mainframe all over again. Your end user PC is now just a terminal for doing the input. The next step that we've seen is the movement to the cloud, and where the cloud helps, especially in the case of a small business, is that it again levels that playing field so that everybody has access to the same software. Somebody from a small business has the same capability, the same tools, the same toolkit to be able to go in and competitively win proposals and use all of the tools that are available to them. And large customers or large contractors and companies are less likely to go that route. You know, they spend a great deal of money trying to invest in their infrastructure and build up their internal network for security and hardening and all of the hardware and software costs that they put in. It's almost, you know, I don't want to say good money after bad, but it has been a major investment on their part, and just pulling, you know, the trigger and getting rid of all of that stuff can be very cost prohibitive. So with the low startup costs, with the, you know, ability for a small business to do with almost no investment, go right into a cloud tool that allows them to have the same, you know, calculations, the same functionality, the same capability as some of those larger contractors, actually makes them a little bit more effective. Where I think that's beneficial is on how much money the DoD is actually spending on small businesses. You know, when we start looking at the portion of businesses that are small businesses that are getting funding from the DoD, you know, over the last 10 years or so, small businesses account for about 25% of prime contracts and almost 40% of subcontractor contracts. So that's a lot of money going to these small businesses. So making sure that they have the same sort of tools, and especially when you add in HubZone and disabled veteran-owned small business, women-owned small business, um, the numbers of not only percentage of DoD contracts, but the dollar values that are going to these small businesses, anything that we can do to make them more competitive and give them a shot, I think is just value add.
Michael, could you tell us about how the Defense Department is trying to reach out to these small businesses, maybe in ways that they weren't in the past, any sort of organizations they may have or programs? And then also, how are small businesses trying to reach to DoD that in ways maybe they didn't in the past as well?
I think that the introduction of things like SBIR and STTR is a great way to sort of take research and development and take it out of some of those big companies and big labs and move them into a little bit more of an agile environment where small businesses are likely to have a faster opportunity to pivot and change. And when you see that many of these SBIR proposals are not far required, it makes a small business much more likely to be able to submit and win a proposal that helps keep those numbers up for the DoD. So when you're talking about the number of proposal percentages or dollars that are being awarded to small businesses, the women-owned small business, small disadvantaged business, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, which we have a lot of those springing up, and even HubZone, those percentages are goal to get even higher over the next 10 years, because it gives everybody an opportunity to submit proposals on that level playing field. When it comes to the way that DoD reaches out to them, I think that the cloud has helped there a little bit too, because now we have websites where you can go in and publish all of your proposal information, especially on SBIR sites, where each of the agencies can put out a page that allows you to go in as a small business and submit, what your overhead or your G&A percentage is, being able to answer all of your proposal cover sheet questions and add your technical volume. It really makes it easy for any of those companies to see what that process is like and to be able to submit proposals a little bit more effectively.
And we're also seeing some things like pitch days and hackathons as well too. That kind of brings in people, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we started to see, or at least that I've started to see a little bit more of over the last couple of years, is pilot programs. For us, when we thought about getting into the government industry or government agencies, it was really one of those things where you thought you had to go in at the top and work your way down. And it just became a bureaucratic nightmare. It's really hard to get, a software platform or any of your goods and services at the top of an agency. So working with a pilot group, a group that focuses on innovation and works towards, getting new products or new materials out quicker with a smaller startup or investment, makes it prime for an agile small business to be able to go in. And whether they find out about those on pitch days, we see kind of like the government version of Shark Tank, where you can go in and get a yes or no and get some initial funding right there. I think that's great for SBIRs to be able to say, there are initial funding levels and we can say, stop, if it's not going to work, we're going to do some R&D. And if we can make this work, that's great. We'll move on to the next phase, phase 2, and see if we can go from there. But, it gives everybody a fair chance. It gives everybody an opportunity to go in and prove that their technology or that their product is the right way to go, and helps it get rolled out quicker. I think it's a really cool concept.
Let's delve in a little bit more to pricing in general. It's something that your company has an expertise in. How is DoD pricing for acquisition? It might be a little bit of an enigma for some people. And why does it need companies like yours to help change the way that it's doing that?
Well, so there's a couple of answers to that question. I'll start by saying that one of the areas that really interests me right now is OTAs, or the other transactional authority. For years and years, we've prided ourselves on being, one of those software vendors that can provide outputs that are FAR and CAS compliant. But with OTAs, that sort of goes away. Those proposals can be awarded in under a month. You're lessening a lot of the bureaucracy that takes place during the proposal award process and even the audit. And, it makes it easier for people to come up with that number and submit it. That doesn't mean that that number is always going to be correct. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of the FAR. And for me, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're thinking of like large programs, so weapon systems and aircraft, the big ticket items. Wrapping your mind around the total hours and all of the costs and everything that's included in that, misestimating or misquoting uh, even something as small as 0.5% on a proposal that's going to be in the $1 trillion range or hundreds of billions of dollars range, we're still talking about millions or billions of dollars that could be misspent or misclassified. So from the small business perspective, even if you're going through those OTAs where you don't have to be FAR compliant, one of the ways we can really help is to create a standardized process for you. You may not need to be FAR compliant, but you still need to have great insight into what you're doing. So being able to justify, even if it's just internally, what those numbers are to make yourself more competitive, that just makes sense for me. But we always tell our small businesses when we sit down with them that, we do help standardize that process. We eliminate formula errors. You're not just copying a sheet that you've worked on before that may have embedded issues or fat fingering on numbers that you don't find until likely when you're getting audited. That there's a key advantage to having a permissions-based system that says, here are the users that can have access to this system. Here's what they can do inside of that system. When you look at either a homegrown tool or Excel, you're likely to be able to see, especially in an Excel file, where anybody can go in and make any change any place in the document. So even creating new acquisition methodologies like OTAs, the benefit of using a pricing software still makes a lot of sense because you can hot swap your pricers in. You don't have to worry about what type of program they worked on before. All of the resources for your labor categories are predefined. Your rates are set up and reusable. You've got that one-to-many relationship that allows you to update your rates as they come in and reuse them as many times as possible. It just makes it easier for them to go in and knock proposals out faster, spend time doing the estimating, getting that part right and doing the analysis, trusting that the numbers are right, and then submitting it knowing that you're going to be more competitive because you were able to do the analysis rather than making sure that your formulas were right.
We're going to take a quick break. My guest today is Michael Weaver. He's the Director of Operations at ProPricer. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, and you're listening to the discussion Bringing Small Business into the Defense World, sponsored by ProPricer on Federal News Network.